So have you ever been afraid of money? If you have, congratulations, you're a human being. Now we've all been there, but for some of us, those kind of fears might be holding us back from financial growth. So today, I'll be walking through some of those fears, but more importantly, how can we break free of them? And if that interests you, stay tuned for the rest of the video, and if you're ready, let's go! Hey guys, it's Sunmin here and welcome back to Your Money Game, the show where we get better with saving, spending and investing. And happy belated Halloween! So you recognize that sensation, right? Where your pulse quickens, your heart beats a little bit faster, there's that discomfort in your stomach and maybe your palms get a little bit more sweaty. No, it's not indigestion, it's fear. So let's start with the fear of overwhelm. So that's me right now trying to understand the realm of blockchain and decentralized finance. When it comes to the topic of money, it can be so big and so daunting that for some of us, it's really a big hurdle to try and cross. And that can be in the area of investing, figuring out your finances, your daily needs, and then on top of that, trying to factor in what you might need for retirement. Now, I'll say this once here, but it applies to all the points in the future. Fear itself isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's actually what fear does to us, which kind of pushes us to make decisions which might not be really good for us. So here are the potential things that could happen because of the fear of overwhelm. For some of us, that fear begins with us delaying a decision, or worse still, putting it off altogether. For example, this could be the fear of investing, where for some of us, we actually are so afraid of it that we put our money into basic savings accounts and then we don't end up doing anything and earn the basic savings rate. Or it could be as simple as trying to figure out what your tax reliefs are. And while on the surface it looks complicated and maybe not worth the effort, in reality it could save you up to thousands a year, and then with the power of compound interest, those thousands add up to six figures in a long time period. But the biggest one for me is that when people are so overwhelmed by money that they're so afraid that they decide to give all their power to one single person to be in charge of their financial fate. So let's use a husband and wife scenario. It is actually quite common that one spouse will give all the power to the other person to be in charge of everything financial. Now, this is not a problem if it's simple delegation and one person understands what's going on. So in that scenario, unfortunately, if tragedy happens, the person that's left behind not only has to deal with the loss of their loved one, but then they have to deal with a financial loss as well. Another scenario could be that you completely trust an advisor with everything to do with your investments and money, and then you don't really know what they're doing, or you have no idea why they're doing it. Now, without going into too much details, this exact thing happened to a close friend of mine. She gave her entire savings to one advisor who, over a span of 8 years, managed to kind of get her a return of roughly about 3% over the long run in investing. Now, on the surface, 3% might not seem like such a bad thing, right? Because after all, you didn't lose money. The problem becomes once you kind of look at it in better context. This happened during the period of 2010 to about 2018, which is during one of the greatest bull markets in history. Now, I'm not saying that all advisors are bad. It is simply my personal belief that an advisor should be consulted rather than 100% of the trust and 100% of all that responsibility is passed on to that advisor. So what can we really do about this fear of overwhelm? First is to realize that you do not need to be an expert, because all you need to do is know enough to have a general conversation about the topic, and then perhaps if you wanted to, you could use an advisor. Secondly, is you don't need to be an expert overnight, meaning that you do not have to learn everything in one go, and you can take your time to learn a subject. And if the subject happens to be really big and really daunting, one interesting trick is to actually look for a book on that subject. And then once you find the book, go into the table of contents and see how the author chooses to break that topic down. The second technique is what you call just-in-time learning. Like the name suggests, it's really a technique to not try and digest all the information on the table at one go. It is really learning step by step at the point in which you are going to apply that information. So for example, if you wanted to start to invest, you might be like, oh, I got to learn every single thing about the markets. I must learn how to evaluate individual stocks. I must learn about ETFs, futures, options, brokers. But don't take things at one large chunk and try to bite it all at one go. Finally, I think there's some really good books out there. My personal favorites are Money or Your Life, The Simple Path to Wealth, and Money Master the Game. So all these 3 books I believe are very comfortable beginner books that gives you a nice overview of different things, and then from there, depending on maybe the subtopic that could be important to you, you can always dive deeper. What's also easy for beginners is clicking on that like and subscribe button, because that helps my videos reach more people and ultimately helps my channel grow as well. Next is our fear of not being good enough. This is a really insidious one, which I feel affects most of us in life. It's that little voice in your head that says, I'll never be good enough. I'll never be smart enough. I'll never be disciplined enough, capable enough, knowledgeable enough. I'll never be handsome enough. Insert any important part of your life into that, and then that little voice will somehow find a way to talk you out of it because it thinks that you're no good. So even though that voice is really little, here's some of the kind of damage that it can do to us. The first effect is on our spending. And it's because sometimes, but not always, when we spend on things, it's not because we really value it, but it's because somebody else's expectations of us. And these expectations might point to a reality that you have this inner feeling that's telling you you won't be accepted or you won't be loved because you didn't have those things. The best quote that I've heard related to this is, we buy things we don't really need with money we don't really have to impress people we don't really like. Another place that little voice frequently pops up is in our workplace, and that's where we could really be selling ourselves short because of it. As a result, we don't feel confident in taking on bigger responsibilities because, again, we're not good enough, right? And it's not just more responsibilities, but even more money. Because if you've ever felt the fear of negotiating for a raise, hey, that's something that a lot of us go through. But in reality, it's holding you back because some people truly deserve it. They can negotiate for it, but they're just so afraid, or they feel that they are not deserving of it. So what can we do about those voices? The first thing to do is to sit down with your favorite drink and reflect on why you desire certain things. The goal there is to better understand what's really driving you. Are those needs really needs? Or perhaps are they wants? And if it's a want, is it your want? Or is it someone else's expectations that's driving you to want those things? When it comes to the workplace, what you could do is to try and pause those voices and try to be as objective as possible. Pretend you're doing this for a friend, and that friend happens to be you, and all you're doing is really sitting down and listing down objectively what are the different accomplishments, different strengths, and different abilities of that person. And if you happen to come up with a very short list after that process, it's not the end of the world. It's just, again, an objective way of assessing what's happening, and if you choose to make a decision to kind of self-improve, learn, add more skills, that's at least within your power, and again, you're doing it from an objective perspective. And finally, unless you're Mr. or Mrs. Confident, odds are you'll need to work on your self-esteem over a long-term period. For me, while I'm still a work in progress, I've come to appreciate that, hey, we're all imperfect, and if somebody looks like they got their shit all together, odds are they might not really have everything in their life figured out. We, you and me, we're no different. We're often too preoccupied worrying about what other people will think, but in reality, they're not thinking about us at all. So instead, keep focusing on yourself, nudging yourself closer and closer towards your goals. And lastly, it's the twin devils of fearing of losing money and the fearing of wasting money. This one might seem like a duh one, right? Because of course we're afraid of losing money. Of course we're afraid of wasting money. So here's how it can possibly affect us in a bad way. So similar to the fear of overwhelm, it can have the same effect from preventing us from starting, but it can also prevent us from investing in bigger things in life. Whether you're Malaysian or Singaporean, research seems to show that people are really risk averse when it comes to investing. Now, I'm not knocking the good behavior of savings itself. Especially for young people, overly safe investments might look like they're rock solid on the surface, but once you factor in inflation and once you factor in the goals that you might have over a long term, they might not be able to produce the result. And on top of that, you potentially waste precious time compounding bigger gains over the long term. And the other thing we might not be spending on is ourselves. We might not want to spend money on courses or books to try and upgrade the skills that we have. There's all that fear about, hey, maybe it's not really worth the money. What happens if I buy the course and it's not really useful? And then on top of that, hey, there's so much free stuff online, right? Why should I really want to pay for it? But in truth, sometimes it's really difficult and it's impossible to replicate the structure of a good course or a set of books that can help you learn a certain subject. So if you're worried about me trying to sell you my course right now, chill, don't worry, this isn't a sales pitch. I'm just speaking from experience as somebody who spent more than 5 figures investing in different kind of courses and books. So here's how we can overcome those two fears that's holding us back from investing in greater things. Starting with the realm of investments, you have to realize that risk isn't the same thing as volatility. And it's true when it comes to savings accounts and fixed deposits, you will never lose your money, or rather it's next to 0% chance. But guess what? If your returns are lower than inflation, it is 100% chance that you will actually lose the value of money over time. Now, to me, that's actually a riskier thought. Research shows that over a long period, there's no other asset class that beats stocks for total returns. Yes, the volatility of prices might hurt in the short term, but that's only because you're paying too much attention to it. Invest for the long term in a diversified way and don't pay too much attention to daily price movements and just keep your eyes on the big picture. And that's the same tip for investing in yourself as well. The way I overcome that hurdle is that in my mind, if I invested in one particular book or a course, as long as I get one really good idea, it actually has the power to completely change the way I try and solve a problem, or it merely helps me get that much closer to a goal that I have. And naturally, if those goals are big and ambitious, what's a small little investment that, hey, it might have a really big payoff? Of course, with that said, be a savvy buyer as well. Always read reviews, check it's not a scam, and if it finally all looks okay, hey, take the plunge and invest in it. What about you? What kind of fears have you perhaps overcome in time? And maybe you have some tips to share with us in the comments below. So once again, happy belated Halloween, and I hope you guys found this useful. If you did, I would really appreciate your support in clicking that like, subscribe, as well as that bell button, because I'm going to be back again next Sunday with a brand new video about how we can get better with money. And until then, you take care and keep playing your own game.